Housing, First Steps Toward Independent Living. Hi, my name is Susan Shimoda, and I am the Housing Project Coordinator here at Pacer Center. Pacer is a Minnesota nonprofit organization and a national parent center that provides information, training, and assistance to parents of children and young adults with all disabilities. I have a 25-year-old son with autism spectrum disorder and a mental health disability. Today, I am going to talk to you about the important first steps to take when thinking about housing and services for your son or daughter. This webinar will address how you can help your son or daughter develop independent living skills, how Olmstead is driving change in housing and services, what is person-centered thinking and planning, how can the person-centered thinking and planning process provide information and direction for independent living options, and what are the current housing options? When we use the term independent living, some of us assume the person must have already established a complete level of independence or ability to live independently. This is not true. Independent living is going to look different for each individual depending on their vision for independent living, financial resources, and level of supports. First and foremost, you and your son or daughter need to sit down with a vision or a plan. When I talk to parents, young adults, and housing providers, the number one issue I hear is that many parents and young adults have not had the discussion about what is important to them, their gifts, strengths, and contributions. Families tend to be focused on the shelter aspect of housing. For example, somebody might call me and say, I want my son John to live in a group home, or I think my daughter Sarah should live in an apartment. Instead of thinking, what quality of life would John or Sarah desire? What is important to them? What is important for them? And what values, morals do we as their family and support circle desire for them? We will be covering those shortly when we discuss person-centered thinking concepts. Second, parents may not understand what their son or daughter's level of support is, what services they may be currently receiving in school, and if they are in special education, the content of their transition IEP. I am going to be using the term level of support because level of support is one of the key factors that qualifies your son or daughter for services. Level of support can consist of essential supports, strategies, and accommodations that your son or daughter might need. As parents, we all want to see our children and young adults grow, be productive, live, work, and play in the community as any other young adult. We want them to have a free life as an adult, but not just any life, a life that your son or daughter owns. When we look at developing independent living skills, these are some of the areas to address: meal planning and preparation, shopping, money management and budgeting, personal medications, first aid, healthcare, the use of telephone and other utilities, personal appearance and hygiene, apartment, home, and maintenance, personal safety and the use of community emergency services, self-advocacy, rights and responsibilities of community living, social, recreation and mobility skills, transportation, and coping skills and behavior management. As you look at these categories, how independently is your son or daughter performing under each of them? What are the essential support strategies and accommodations needed to enable your son or daughter to reach their goals, meet their needs and interests, and help them grow? As parents of young adults with disabilities, performing daily tasks for them may become second nature. Sometimes in the hectic day-to-day pace of daily living, it is simply easier to perform the task for our son or daughter rather than to stop and teach them the skill. For many of us, we may not know where to start. Many times it's difficult for us to know how to break down the steps of a task, and for some of us, we may lack the knowledge of assistive technology devices or strategies that could help our son or daughter perform the task more independently. Some of these skills may be difficult to master for young adults with disabilities, and some may need help on an extended basis. Mastery will look different for each person. Direct teaching of life skills is essential for young adults, both with significant and mild disabilities. Young adults with disabilities may have splinter skills in a life skill area. A splinter skill is mastery by a student of some, but not all, of the skills in a skill sequence. For example, a student may know some aspects of a functional life skill, such as how to subtract the checks from the ledger on the checkbook, but not be able to complete the entire skill correctly and independently write a check. Another example would be if the goal is transportation, your son or daughter's long-term goal may be earning their driver's license and learning how to drive a car. For another individual, the long-term goal may be learning the steps to ride public transportation. What daily skills are you working on with your son or daughter to increase their development? And what support are they getting from the school or community to increase their skill development? For example, I had one parent tell me that she worked with her son to find iPad apps to provide visual supports for him. The app helped him to remember the steps in his morning daily routine, like getting dressed, making his bed, brushing his hair and teeth, eating breakfast, and getting ready for the bus. Another parent told me they worked with their child to know what medications he was taking for what symptoms. They set a reminder alarm on his watch so he would remember to take his medication at the appropriate time. Another young adult told me that he had learned how to cook his favorite meal. He and his dad needed to plan what items they needed for the meal, shop and purchase the items, follow the recipe, and cook the meal. Think about what areas your son or daughter need further assistance with. Depending on the skills your son or daughter has, these steps may need to be broken down further and practiced. Practicing these important independent living skills now will help them prepare for living in a place of their own later. Now I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the Transition IEP and independent living. First, I'd like you to know the definition in IDEA 2004 for transition services, which means a coordinated set of activities for a child with a disability that is designed to be a results-oriented process that is focused on improving the academic, functional achievement of the child with a disability to facilitate the child's movement from school to post-school activities, including post-secondary education, vocational education, integrated employment, continuing and adult education, adult services, independent living, and/or community participation. It is also based on the individual child's needs, taking into account the child's strengths, preferences, and interests, which includes instruction, related services, community experiences, the development of employment, and other post-school adult living objectives, and when appropriate, the acquisition of daily living skills. This is something that we'd like to focus on. As we look at the Transition IEP, first the IEP team needs to identify the present levels of performance, strengths, needs, and interests. This leads to creating the measurable post-secondary goals, which leads to creating the transition services that include the annual goals, the courses of study, and other activities. First, I'd like to talk to you a little while about the present levels of performance regarding your son or daughter's strengths, needs, and preferences. Transition planning in most cases is an interagency effort, and the family is a required component. At this time, the team should be looking at expanding its members to include other agencies like vocational rehabilitation, social services, and other related services in the planning and implementation of the transition activities. The team needs to identify the present levels of performance, including strengths, preferences, and interests. Direct teaching of life skills is essential for young adults both with significant and mild disabilities. Functional life skills assessment is integral to a comprehensive transition evaluation. Most secondary special education curriculum is composed of 4 domains, including academic skills, vocational skills, social skills, and independent living skills. For most of you, your team will have already completed the evaluation process. Federally, the transition evaluation process begins at age 16. In Minnesota, it's age 14 or 9th grade. Assuming your son or daughter is making progress on their goals and objectives, you should remember that these assessments may be needed to be updated annually. You and your son or daughter will be playing an integral role and can share the independent living skills that you have been working on in the family home with the IEP team. The important thing now is to shift your thinking and put your son or daughter in the driver's seat so they are at the center of the planning process, and ask them, when you grow up, where do you think you would like to live and work? Talk with your son or daughter about the places they like to go, the activities they like to do, and the people they like to be with. These questions encourage person-centered thinking. I'd suggest that you revisit the subject with your child on multiple occasions, and you could also have discussions with relatives and friends if your son or daughter is not able to actively participate. For example, if activities are essential or are needed to happen to make your son or daughter's post-secondary goal, the team needs to discuss this. You can ask the team, which of these things is the school going to be addressing during their curriculum? For example, if your son or daughter needs to have accessible housing when they go to college, the activity on the transition IEP would be setting up time to visit with the college and get more information and discuss the accommodations they need. For more information on transition and independent living, please refer to our PACER publications, Mapping Dreams, Transition into Adulthood, and the Minnesota Secondary Transition Toolkit for Families. These resources are listed at the end of this webinar. Next, let's look at some home living IEP goals. First, we're going to start out with a girl named Sarah, and her present levels of performance are strengths in daily living, proper grooming and hygiene, and she dresses appropriately. She is able to identify money and make change and is partially competent in making expenditures. She uses the phone, performs household cleaning, and can do laundry. She lacks sufficient skills in food preparation, which means planning for a variety of healthy, balanced meals, storing food, and good eating habits, in budgeting, learning how to maintain her checking and savings account, and housekeeping, handling household emergencies, including using appliances and tools and selecting adequate housing. So a future goal might be, after graduation, I, Sarah, plan to live with a roommate in an apartment in the city. The transition needs would be that Sarah needs to develop skills in food preparation, budgeting, housekeeping, and she needs to know what apartment options exist in the location she prefers. So some transition services and activities might be that Sarah will access an online apartment search engine such as housinglink.org or apartmentlist.com to begin to identify what options are available in the price range and location she desires. Sarah will contact a disability advocacy organization to find out what resources and services are available to support her future goal. And Sarah will register for money management and budgeting as an elective course for one semester during her senior year. Her annual IEP goal might be Sarah will increase her home living skills from partial competence to competent. And the instructional objectives and benchmarks include Sarah will begin to develop a budget for apartment living by listing the rental rates from her online search. Or Sarah will reconcile her checkbook 2 months in a row with minimal assistance and no errors as recorded by her special education teacher. Given a list of 5 household emergencies, Sarah will identify the steps to take to respond to the emergency in each of the 5 situations as measured by the special education teacher. Examples of situations could be a plan to address emergencies in case of a fire or a storm, an escape plan, or a plan to address plumbing accidents. Sarah will plan and prepare a healthy lunch without assistance as observed by her IEP manager by her next annual IEP meeting. When given 6 common household appliances, Sarah will name the appliance and demonstrate their use correctly 4 out of 5 times as measured by her classroom teacher by the next annual IEP meeting. Independent living skills. There are nearly 500 centers for independent living centers in the United States and 8 in the state of Minnesota. Commonly known as CILs, they are mandated by law. CILs provide a variety of core services for some persons with disabilities, including information and referral, independent living skills training, peer counseling and support, advocacy, systemic and individual, and other services like recreation, equipment repair, and information on housing modifications. There are also advocacy, resource, and referral organizations that represent your son or daughter's disability, and they have resources. They may help with teaching self-advocacy, provide written materials and other resources or referrals, offer peer support or support groups, give ideas for assistive technology, provide disability-related assessment resources, and give technical assistance about your son or daughter's disability to a post-secondary school or workplace. Self-determination is about empowerment and self-advocacy, having a person-centered vision and being able to dream about what we want our lives to be like, choice and right to make the decisions for ourselves, and power and control over resources which are necessary to act on our choices and decisions. Self-determination is important for all students with and without disabilities, regardless of the type or severity of this disability. So why is this important for you to understand? Today, we are in the middle of a systems change from old institutional models to new models or supportive housing that is evolving to provide the same supportive services in a more integrated setting in the community. And by integrated, this may not necessarily mean the typical 4-bedroom group home many of you have been familiar with, but in their own homes or apartments with or without people with disabilities. You and I are of the generation that has been accustomed to inclusive education services, and we are entering an adult services world that is still largely based on the medical model or institutionalized thinking, but that is changing. We, meaning you and I, have the opportunity to create the new systems of housing and services based on our beliefs of inclusion and person-centered practices. We think it is important for you to remember this concept when advocating for appropriate housing and services. In addition, financial limitations and new changes in the law are transforming housing and services and are opening up new options for persons with disabilities based on the principles of self-determination. In 1999, with the Olmstead Decision, the right of people with disabilities to live in the community was reinforced by the United States Supreme Court. Lois Curtis and Elaine Wilson wanted to receive services from the state of Georgia in the community instead of a psychiatric institution. They argued that Georgia violated their right to services in the most integrated setting under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Their case went all the way to the Supreme Court. The court ruled that integration is fundamental to the purposes of ADA and that states may be required to provide community-based services rather than institutional placement for individuals with disabilities. No matter where a person lives, services and supports should be matched to an individual's needs based on the concept of living in the most integrated setting. This also applies to persons that are at risk of unnecessary institutionalization because of the lack of community-based housing and supportive services. Over the past 15 years, states have been slow to embrace new models for housing. In recent years, the federal government has directed federal agencies to vigorously enforce the civil rights of Americans with disabilities. The Department of Justice has now made enforcement of Olmstead a top priority. Minnesota now has an Olmstead plan. The vision statement is, Minnesota will be a place where people with disabilities are living, learning, working, and enjoying life in the most integrated setting in the areas of employment, housing, transportation, supports and services, lifelong learning and education, health care and healthy living, and community engagement. Minnesota's Olmstead Committee identified some of these barriers. They are lack of affordable, accessible housing. The only choice is to live with roommates they do not know. One size does not fit all approach to housing. Supports and services are needed before someone is in a crisis, so not to face hospitalization, jail, or homelessness. Concerns about reimbursement rates, lack of waivers and waiting lists, and a quality direct service workforce that has pay, benefits, professional development to allay shortages, turnover, and the reliability of workers. For more information, I encourage you to go to PACER's project page and view the link to Minnesota's Olmstead Plan. What is person-centered thinking and planning? One of the first steps in person-centered thinking, which starts before person-centered planning, is to consider where your son or daughter might want to live on their own. For example, you might think your daughter would like to have a roommate and live within walking distance of a library and park. Notice that I didn't ask you what type of situation you want your daughter to live in, but rather what type of housing you think she would want when she grows up. This is person-centered thinking. As we mentioned earlier, you may want to have a casual conversation with your son or daughter and ask the same question. When you grow up, where do you think you would want to live and work? Talk with them about the places they like to go, activities they like to do, and the people they like to be with. These questions encourage person-centered thinking. Person-centered planning focuses on outcomes, dreams, and visions of the individual. It is a set of tools that focus on persons and families rather than programs. It is a process driven by the individual's and the family's unique vision, likes and dislikes. It brings together all the people who are important to that person, family, friends, neighbors, support workers, and other professionals. And it is an ongoing journey that requires people to think about how to do things differently. Person-centered thinking and planning can identify hopes and dreams, help a young adult link current learning with identified goals, help a young adult identify his supports, aid in the process of developing self-determination, support decisions, help motivate all team members, and as we spoke about earlier, transition activities must be based on the student's strengths, needs, and preferences. It also can provide information and direction for the Transition IEP, the County Coordinated Service and Support Plan, called the CSSP. There are a variety of tools to use for person-centered planning. Some of the names of the formal tools that are used if you choose to work with a person-centered planning facilitator are Essential Lifestyle Planning, Personal Futures Planning, MAPS, Paths, and Circles of Support. There are other tools that we want to introduce you to shortly that you could get started on with your son or daughter. Why is person-centered planning important to address in the housing process? Housing is not just a place to live. It is about your son or daughter's vision of how they want to live a self-directed life. Person-centered thinking and planning is now part of the law to help he or she do this. For those of you who downloaded the materials for this webinar, please take out the blank one-page profile and the 3 one-page profile examples. First, who developed the concept of the one-page profile? Helen Sanderson is a visionary leader in the person-centered international community that is part of a larger umbrella organization called the Learning Community for Person-Centered Practices. They work with people in health, social care, education, and with communities and families. The examples presented in this webinar include person-centered concepts, principles, and materials used with the permission from the Learning Community for Person-Centered Practices. To find out more, you can visit their link at learningcommunity.us, which is included on this slide. How can we use the one-page profile to plan for services and supports? The one-page profile captures what is important to the person, important for the person, and how they want to be supported. The information in the one-page profile can be used for housing providers and support staff, family members and friends, case managers, and medical providers. The purpose of a one-page profile and a person-centered description is to provide a summary of person-centered information that people in the person's life can use to either get to know them quickly or ensure that they are providing consistent support in a way that the person wants. By considering what is important to and for a person and what good support looks like, they are a way to create actions that make a difference. How can we use the one-page profile to plan for services and supports? A one-page profile typically has 3 sections: an appreciation about the person, what is important to that person from their perspective, and how to support them well, or what is important for the person. So if you pull out your blank one-page profile, you will see in the upper left corner you have a place to put a picture of your son or daughter. Then there is an appreciation section, which lists the positive qualities, strengths, and talents of the person. It is also what we call the like and admire section about that person. There is a section for important to the person, what matters to that person from their perspective, and important people in the person's life, when and how they spend time together. What is important to the person? Important activities and hobbies, when, where, and how, and often these take place. Any routines that are important to the person, sometimes we call those rituals and routines. And what's important for the person or how to support the person. what people need to know and what people need to do, what is helpful and what is not. Amanda's profile. I'm not going to read through all of this now for you, but we'll highlight a few items on some of the following profiles. So first we'll look at Amanda's profile. The appreciation section of this profile include what people like and admire about Amanda. My laugh, I am adventurous, energetic, and perky. I am passionate, generous, gracious, kind, focused, and resilient. What is important to Amanda is that her reliance and trust of the members of her community. She does not want to be manipulated, and she has clear boundaries around her health care because it is her responsibility. She goes on to talk about how to best support her by discussing her feelings and why she has them. I need my doctor to know my name. I need the same nurse each time I come in for treatment because these are traumatic experiences and I need to form a relationship. She needs clear written instructions for items others need her to remember or she will forget. And this one-page profile contains additional information on what is working and not working regarding her medical care and timelines listed for some items that she needs to complete. Sarah's profile. So what people like and admire about Sarah are: she has a passion and zest for life, she is friendly and fun, she has positive energy and wants to advocate for others. She is also independent and very resourceful. Important to Sarah is being respected, socializing, joking, and making a difference for people. And also people not messing with her things. How she can best be supported, and her needs to keep her happy, healthy, and safe. One person giving her clear directions and expectations, and choices to keep her from getting bored. She needs always to have a plan B. To be supported unconditionally so she can gain trust and to ask her to do something rather than tell her to do it. This profile also contains additional information about future goals, including what kind of housing option she would like, to have access to public transportation, and the opportunity to earn her GED so she can become employed, and to have the appropriate mental health supports. Rachel's profile. I like this profile because Rachel and her family have used some very descriptive language. So what others like and admire about Rachel are her model good looks, she is a stunner, her ability to make friends and connect with people, her taste in men, music, and DVDs, her long eyelashes and expressive eyes. What is important to Rachel: contact with her family, especially her mom and sister Lindsay, listening to pop music, and she goes on to list who her favorite bands are. Having people around to have a laugh and giggle and having fun, and she likes to have water fights in the bath. Looking stylish and her trendy clothes, and it goes on to talk about how she likes her hair and nails done. Rachel has a physical disability, so she prefers not to be in her chair any longer than she has to. She also has a communication chart, which is a tool we will cover shortly, so that everyone that supports her understands her communication. Important for Rachel, that include health and safety needs. They emphasize that Rachel has complex needs and these need to be understood before you can fully support her, and that her supports need to read the details of her health action plan in order to properly support her, as it contains vital detailed information about how to stay healthy and safe. This one-page profile goes on to address her physical needs, medical needs, and dietary needs. So you can see what a powerful tool this could be used across settings between her in-home supports, natural supports, and her medical team. These are some ideas of how to get started on your one-page profile for your son or daughter. We have included the template for you. It doesn't have to be complex. You and your son or daughter are the experts. How can we use the one-page profile to plan for services and supports? Once you have completed a one-page profile, each person-centered thinking tool can be used to gather further information which can lead to actions. The following tools can be used to create a longer, more detailed person-centered description. I would like to go over a few of these tools so you are aware of them and can see how they can help you communicate essential information about your son or daughter to others that support them. The person-centered description includes tools working and not working, the communication chart, matching supports, and the learning log. Again, for more information on these tools and samples, please go to the Learning Community for Person-Centered Practices. You will find many helpful examples and videos there. How many of you have staff supports now for your son or daughter? Getting a good match between your son or daughter and the person that will support them is very important. The matching tool is a simple way to record the skills needed that are important to and for the person. The matching tool has 4 columns. The first column is the support that the person wants and needs. The second is the skills required to support them. The third are the personality characteristics that are crucial. And the fourth is the shared common interests they have with your son or daughter. Some questions to consider when thinking about this is, who is the person closest to? And what characteristics do they have in common with each other? With whom does the person have the most good days? Is there anyone whose presence help create bad days? And what does this tell you about the characteristics of the support person that work for that person in need of support? The communication chart is a simple but powerful way to record how someone communicates with his or her behavior, which is clearer than communicating with words. Instead of recording what the person does, we record what we are trying to communicate to the person, and then what we are encouraging that person to do. The easiest to look at either what the person does or what we think it means is filling in the second or third column first. Start with the easy, clear communications like knowing when the person is angry or sad. How do they demonstrate this? What do you need to do to comfort or support them? How do you know this? And when are they most likely to be angry or sad? The information gathered for this one-page description for Alex conveys what is important to him when looking for a housing provider and a roommate. Alex starts his one-page profile out by advertising for an awesome roommate. He wants to know if the person would like to be active like himself, like to work out, go biking and walking around the lakes. Do they like Xbox 360 and going to card club? He goes on to say what his disability is, autism spectrum, and where he lives and the types of services that he receives. He says that he and his parents are looking for another young adult to partner with a housing provider to provide individualized supports in an apartment setting, and then leaves his phone number to contact him. There is a section that discusses what people like and admire about him. He's got a great rote memory and a great long-term memory for numbers, people's names, and quirky details, and that he's verbal. He loves humor. He goes on to talk about what is important to him, being on the computer, working out, being on the go, frisbee golf, music, books, board games. He talks about where he likes to go out to eat and his transportation needs. He goes on to list best supports, that he's able to remain active in the community. Again, he likes to be on the go, so he needs flexibility in his program and staffing. He wants to find another person 18 to 25 years with similar interests. He wants to live with others who are kind and compassionate and becomes anxious and fearful with aggressive behaviors. He'd like to live in a physical environment that meets his sensory needs with ample space and that is not noisy with a lot of commotion. He needs his staff to have training in autism spectrum disorders, and that will help him with visual supports so that he can navigate transitions. He needs staff that is easygoing and has a good sense of humor, and staff that are different age groups because that is what he enjoys. So we hope this gives you some idea of how to get started on your one-page profile with your son or daughter. It doesn't have to be complex. You and your son or daughter are the experts. Building your support networks. What are natural supports? Natural supports are any assistance, relationships, or interactions, usually unpaid supports, that allow a person with a disability to participate in the community of his or her choosing in ways that correspond to the typical routines and social actions of people without disabilities. The use of natural supports can assist an individual to develop a sense of belonging, dignity, and self-esteem. Natural supports are friends, family, acquaintances, co-workers, volunteers, mentors and peer mentors, church members that promote the involvement in programs, activities, projects, volunteer experiences, and employment. Community inclusion strategies. Ideas for community inclusion to help your son and daughter are to develop a daily routine that involves contact with persons without disabilities in their community, to get to know their neighbors, to meet other people who share similar interests, to become a member of a civic and other local organizations or clubs, to encourage volunteering, to get on the mailing list of different community agencies, and to receive program schedules and information. Become familiar with local businesses, the bank, post office, grocery store, coffee shop, bakery, or faith community. What are the housing options? Some of the reasons why housing is evolving are that parents and individuals with disabilities are demanding housing and services that are integrated and based on person-centered thinking principles. Also, the federal government's directive to implement the Olmstead Decision. There are also more cost-effective ways of serving individuals. There has been a state moratorium on the development of group homes called adult foster care, and separating housing from services. Earlier, we talked about the Olmstead Decision that ruled that a person with a disability should have the right to live in the most integrated setting. 15 years later, the states have been slow to implement its intent. The federal government and the Centers for Medicaid have sent directives to the states to create their own state plans while also changing the law to specify what the changes need to look like. Currently, Minnesota is creating their transition plan to align Minnesota rules with the federal law. The new definition of what a community living setting is. That the individual has a lease or legally enforceable agreement. The individual has privacy in their unit, lockable doors, a choice of roommates, and freedom to furnish or decorate the unit. The individual controls his or her own schedule, including access to food at any time. The individual can have visitors at any time. The setting is physically accessible, and any modification of the above must be supported in a specific assessed need and justified in the person-centered plan. Along with changes to what a community setting is, there are new changes to the rules and requirements. New 245D rules and requirements. So why the change? 245D is the Minnesota statute that provides the rules and requirements for home and community-based services. There have been major changes to the law, which include changes to the assessment, eligibility, and planning process, rate setting, and housing services and supports. The changes were needed to provide a more consistent administration across all home and community-based services in Minnesota. More information can be found on Pacer's Housing Projects page. What housing options do my son or daughter want? First, you need to consider the shelter aspect of housing. The family home, friends or relatives' home, apartment, condominium, townhome, or home, other provider-controlled and participant-controlled, cooperative housing, co-housing, community residential settings, family foster care settings, institutions, intermediate care facilities for individuals with developmental disabilities, called ICFDDs, or nursing homes. We will go into detail on what these options are in a moment. Planning for services and supports. Next, you need to consider what supports and services your son or daughter needs to enable them to live in the most integrated setting. Personal care attendants or PCAs, in-home family support services, home care services, private duty nursing, respite, home and community-based Medicaid waivers, independent living skills, behavior specialist services, semi-independent living services, supported living services, housing access coordination, 24-hour emergency assistance, natural supports, and the state plan option that's coming called Community First Services and Supports. For more information on details of these services and funding for them, please go to Pacer's Housing Projects page. I am going to briefly touch on what a home and community-based waiver is, since many of you have heard about this. Home and community-based waivers. What is a waiver? Minnesotans with disabilities or chronic illnesses who need certain levels of care may qualify for the state's home and community-based service, HCBS, known as waivered services. The program pays for support services so that people can live in the community instead of more restrictive settings like ICFDDs or nursing homes. Waiver funds cannot be used to pay for or supplement room and board costs, but can be used to pay for additional supports to allow the individual to live in the community. There are currently wait lists for these waivers. And again, the new state plan called Community First Services and Supports is a new funding stream that will be consumer-directed home care that will give people additional options. Individualized housing options. Apartment, condominium, townhome, home rental, or ownership. So there has been a big change and a shift in expectations, and that is that people with disabilities can live in their own homes and not necessarily in group settings. So in thinking about what we discussed previously about the definition of what a community setting is, the residents should hold the lease. Receiving services is not a condition of housing, that residents may choose services from any provider or from multiple providers. Residents must be able to lock their own home. They must be able to choose roommates and are free to accept visitors. And settings must have living, sleeping, bathing, and cooking areas. And the concentration of persons with disabilities is low within a setting. Apartment, condominium, townhome, home rental, or ownership, unlicensed. There is participant-controlled housing, in which there are apartments, condos, townhomes, or home rentals, and the participant holds the lease. They also would be choosing the roommates. Then there is also home ownership. Under other provider-controlled housing, there are apartment programs and unlicensed provider-owned or leased homes. Greater opportunities now exist for people with disabilities to rent or own apartments, condos, townhomes, or homes and receive the services and supports they need in the location of their choice. As discussed previously, Olmstead supports the concept that services and supports should be provided to the person with a disability in the most integrated setting possible. This has allowed people with disabilities to create individualized housing options. Some programs don't have to be licensed since the person controls the home by having a lease or owning it. There is also rent assistance that may help some people, called MSA housing assistance. This adds to the flexibility and choices people may have. For example, the person with a disability and/or their parents or guardians may rent or purchase an apartment, condo, townhome, or home. They can then hire their own staff through various funding sources: home and community-based waivers, home care, consumer-directed services, personal care attendant, paid or unpaid natural supports, or contract with a housing provider for services. The mixing and matching of services within service menus allows people with disabilities the ultimate freedom to hire or fire their staff or providers if they so choose. New individualized housing options may include scattered apartments or condos within a market rate property, housing that includes people with and without disabilities in an apartment or condo complex, where a provider has separate apartments or condos and on-site service staff as specified by a person's coordinated service and support plan. Consumer or parent-owned housing where a live-in staff or shift staff is hired by the person with a disability and/or their parent or guardian. Unique arrangements may be used to augment staffing using natural supports, which may involve parents, siblings, community members, or volunteers. Monitoring or smart home technology to augment staff, which allows for increased privacy and monitors the safety of a person with a disability. Renting and owning have advantages and disadvantages. For some people, renting is a better choice. Some renters say they like to have the flexibility to be mobile and to be able to make important lifestyle changes more easily, such as taking a new job or being in a relationship. Others who rent apartments or townhomes like the fact that they are not fully responsible for maintenance. In addition, renters can save money on maintenance and general upkeep, including grounds that are a landlord's responsibility. Home ownership has several advantages over renting. First, being a homeowner is a valued role in our society and one that can closely connect a person to his or her community. Having a home of one's own can provide a sense of permanency for people with disabilities, something that may have been missing if their living situation was previously under the control of others. In addition, people who own their own homes often have more living space and more freedom to change their property as they like. Housing payments are relatively stable. Owning a home also means that people are more likely to become involved in their community because they are likely to live there long term. However, there can be significant costs in securing a home loan and a down payment. A person who owns a home is responsible for its maintenance and repairs. When looking for a home, a person with a disability must think about whether he or she wants to live in a city, a suburb, or in a rural area. He or she will have to determine if physical modifications are needed and available, whether it is better to live alone or with others, and if public transportation is needed that is available and nearby. The answers to these questions will help determine where the person lives. People with disabilities should also be aware of community resources that may be helpful in finding a place to live. For example, many cities offer first-time home buyer money, and many agencies offer home stretch training. Financial assistance may be available from community land trusts such as City of the Lakes here in the Twin Cities metro area. Check your city's website for more information on land trusts and home ownership resources. In addition, please refer to the Guidebook on Consumer-Controlled Housing for Persons with Developmental Disabilities that is located in the resource section at the end of this webinar. Community residential settings. Community residential settings, formerly known as adult corporate foster care settings or group homes, are licensed and registered with the Minnesota Department of Human Services, or DHS, to provide specialized services to people with disabilities through varying levels of care. Community residential settings provide sleeping accommodations and services for 1 to 4 adults, or 5 if the adults residents are elderly. The home is not the primary residence of the license holder. They provide 24-hour continuous care plus support, structure, and nurturance toward achieving individualized goals within a family home environment. Unlike more restrictive settings like intermediary care facilities for individuals with developmental disabilities, or ICFDDs, a community residential setting is less formal and receives special funding called Group Residential Housing, or GRH. Individuals in these settings may be eligible for supported living services, or SLS, paid for by the county. Because these settings are costly, there has been a moratorium on their development since 2009 in the state of Minnesota. A provider needs to be licensed under Minnesota statutes and rules in order to receive state and federal funding. In addition, the provider must adhere to standards adopted to protect the health, safety, rights, and well-being of vulnerable adults. For example, a community residential setting has license requirements unique to that individual program, and routine site visits are required. Community residential settings provide supportive services and health-related services. Supportive services mean the provision of up to 24-hour supervision and oversight. Supportive services include transportation when provided by the provider of support services, socialization if socialization is part of the plan of care that has specific goals and outcomes established, assistance in setting up a person's meetings and appointments, and assistance in arranging medical and social services appointments, assistance with personal laundry and other tasks. Health-related services are limited to minimal assistance with dressing, grooming, bathing, providing reminders to residents to take medications that are self-administered, or providing storage for medications if requested. When a person is living in a community residential setting, a coordinated service and support plan called a CSSP and the addendum must indicate what services the provider will furnish. Coordinated service and support plans and the addendum are developed by the person with a disability and their legal representative, county case manager, and other members of the support team. Service direction should be provided by the person with a disability with assistance from the support staff with oversight from the case manager and the person's guardian or legal representative. Adult family foster settings. These settings can also be called host family homes. They provide the same services as adult corporate foster care with sleeping accommodations and 24-hour continuous care, supportive, and health-related services. They also provide support, structure, nurturance, and control toward achieving individualized goals within a family home environment. And in some instances, your son or daughter may rent or own their own home and rent out a portion of the home to the foster care provider. An intermediate care facility for persons with developmental disabilities is a residential facility licensed as a healthcare institution and certified by the Minnesota Department of Health to provide health or rehabilitative services for persons with developmental disabilities or a related condition who require active treatment. Residents require a 24-hour plan of care to assure health, safety, and well-being, and are usually unable to apply learned skills without ongoing supervision and cannot take care of their personal needs by themselves. According to federal law, individuals with developmental disabilities must have substantial limitations in their present level of functioning, manifested as significantly below average intellectual functioning and demonstrated deficits in adaptive behavior that appear before their 22nd birthday. ICF DDs can serve from 4 to 64 people. Since these facilities are considered institutions, and Olmstead gives the person with a disability the right to live in the most integrated setting, there has been renewed attention given to individuals in these facilities to enable them to live in more integrated settings like community residential settings or individualized housing options. Institutions, nursing homes. Nursing homes are long-term care facilities that offer a full array of personal, dietary, therapeutic, social, spiritual, recreational, and nursing services to residents that need a 24-hour plan for a nursing level of care. A nursing level of care is needed for one or more of the following: cognitive or behavioral condition, existence of complicating conditions, frailty or vulnerability, functional limitation, the need for complex care management, the need for restorative and rehabilitative or other special treatment, and unstable health. Nursing homes should be considered transitional facilities for adults and not permanent residences. Since laws have been passed to deinstitutionalize settings, individuals with developmental disabilities and mental health should not be in nursing homes with individuals over the age of 65. State and federal money pay for lodging expenses if counties place individuals in smaller, more integrated settings like community residential settings and individualized housing options. Cooperative or co-op housing. Individuals interested in home ownership, not only for personal and economic benefits, but also for the social benefits of a community, may organize to form a kind of corporation called a cooperative or a co-op. Members don't own their individual units. Rather, they own one share in the cooperative and have one vote at general membership meetings. Members sell their share back when they move out. After co-op members elect a board of directors, the board may hire a property manager or contract for needed services. The board may also decide that members can manage the services on a volunteer basis. The co-op is eligible for financial assistance or low-cost loans from the government. Shared leadership and responsibilities, including rules and regulations of the co-op, are important factors to consider before you choose to participate in a housing co-op. Your son or daughter may want to look at the activities and interests of other members for compatibility. Co-housing is a relatively new movement in the United States, but it has been functioning successfully in Europe, however, for more than 40 years. Co-housing is a type of intentional collaborative housing in which residents actively participate in the design and operation of their neighborhoods. The philosophy is based on traditional community living where neighbors and residents can share some of the day-to-day responsibilities of family living. Co-housing creates cross-generational communities that invite a variety of families and single people to participate in the planning, design, and ongoing management of the development. A co-housing community typically includes individual units clustered around a common house that might contain a dining room, kitchen, workshop, laundry, or library. Some communities may decide to share responsibilities, such as childcare, or they may plan their dinners together on certain days of the week. Because it is a fairly new concept in the United States, financing can be a problem as a co-housing community does not receive government support. Subsidized housing is a federal rental assistance housing program where the government pays a percentage of the rent for people with low and moderate incomes. The percentage is based on income limits established by the government and varies with different programs. The most commonly available type of subsidized housing is the Section 8 program. Section 8, two kinds of housing. Two kinds of assistance are provided, project-based and tenant-based. Project-based assistance is designated Section 8 buildings that are primarily privately owned but have been built with federal funds. A list of these buildings is available through your local public housing agency. Tenant-based assistance is provided through vouchers or certificates. Some apartments and houses in various communities may accept Section 8 vouchers or certificates, which are funded by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. With Section 8 certificates or vouchers, one generally pays 1/3 of his or her income for rent. These certificates and vouchers are portable, meaning an individual can use them in any community in any state. Virtually all people with disabilities receiving SSI or Supplemental Security Income benefits are eligible because their incomes are well below 50% of the median income. Citizens and non-citizens are eligible who meet HUD's definition of household, which includes one or more adults with disabilities as well as elderly and family households. Because availability can vary widely, it is common for new applicants to be placed on waiting lists. More importantly, housing authorities only take applications at specifically announced times. In concluding this webinar, we hope that you start the conversation with your son or daughter about where they want to live when they grow up. To plan time to begin the person-centered thinking and planning process, and to start networking early. We also encourage you to visit Pacer Center's Housing Projects page for updated information and the dates for our 3-part housing workshop series and annual housing resource and information fair. Thank you.